Hi, everyone. Welcome to our PPP Forgiveness webinar today. It's wonderful to have our great partners from the SBA, Dan Martinello and Caroline Williams, and Anna Kloon from Eastern Bank. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to all of you chamber members who are here with us as well. The plan for today is that Caroline is going to tell us a little bit about the SBA, their Massachusetts office, and then Dan is going to talk about some basics of the forgiveness process and what everyone needs to be thinking about. And then Anna is going to talk about what forgiveness looks like from the perspective of the lender, what documents you need to get together, what you're going to have to submit, and all of those great things. So that is what we are going to do today. We have closed caption available. We're going to put a note in chat about that for folks who might need that. And we are saving time at the end for Q&A as well. So if you have any questions that come up during the presentation that you would like our presenters to address, please pop your questions into Q&A, and Michael will read them out at the end once folks have gone through their specific pieces of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the torch to Caroline, who's going to get us started today. Thank you, Caroline, for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for inviting us. So my name is Caroline Williams. I'm an outreach and marketing specialist with the Massachusetts District Office of the SBA. We are located in Boston, but we also have an office in Springfield. And as an outreach and marketing specialist, it's my job to put a face on the agency and just to tell everyone what the SBA is. So just very quickly, we are a federal agency that was created in 1953 to help people start, grow, and expand their small business, whether that's providing access to capital through our loan programs or helping your company get ready to bid on federal contracts. So we have 68 district offices all over the country. There are, I think, 14 of us, I don't remember, in the Massachusetts district office. And I'll drop our contact info in the chat so that you guys can have access to us, me and Dan. In the meantime, you can also visit our website at sba.gov/MA. I'll drop that in the chat too. And you can always email us with questions at massachusettsdo@sba.gov. So I know everybody's really focused on PPP and EIDL and getting information on their shuttered venue operators grant, but we do want to let you know our regular programs are still being offered. This includes loans through our lending partners like the 7A program, the 504 program, and all the microloans. We still have federal contracting available. You still can be certified as a HUBZone, as an 8A firm or woman-owned service-disabled veteran, etc. So all of those are still going on. And we have, maybe I can drop a link in here too. We do a lot of work with our resource partners, and they provide free and confidential services to help you with any step of your business, whether it's you have an idea, you want to get your business plan ready, or you have a business, you've been in business for a long time and you're looking to expand. So we just work with a few. We work with the Center for Women in Enterprise. That might appeal to you if you're a woman-owned business, or if you're a veteran, you might want to reach out to the folks at the Veterans Business Outreach Center. And I think I can drop links to those in the chat as well. But yeah, we do a lot of work with our resource partners. If you need help with any of the processes, they're the people to reach out to, and those links are also on our site. So I think that's the overview. That's the very brief overview. So here we go.
All right, thanks, Caroline. And I'm Dan Martinello. I'm one of Caroline's colleagues. I work in lender relations for the SBA here in Massachusetts, and we're going to talk about PPP forgiveness, but we're going to stick with first draw forgiveness. So, a lot of folks I know probably have questions when it comes to second draw PPP and that process as well. But, just with the time constraints and everything, we'll try to just focus on one thing for now. We can always, take this conversation further later down the road and elaborate more on the second draw item. So just give me 1 second while I pull up a presentation that we can go over. And Anna too, you know, since you're from Eastern and you're one of our great lending partners, you know, when I go over like the process when it comes to just the general process of the forgiveness side of things, if you want to add anything, stop me, feel free, you know, to go ahead. You know, you know, collaboration on these things is always the best way in my opinion. So hold on one second while I bring this up.
And while Dan is pulling that up, just one super quick note that we are working with the district office on scheduling a presentation about the second draw too. So stay tuned for that, and I'll pass it back to Dan.
Can everybody see the blue SBA? Does it work? Because when I pull it up, for some reason, it just takes over my whole screen and I can't see anybody.
Yeah, we can see it.
Cool. All right, cool. All right, yeah, that's my ugly mug with no facial hair. So, but that's my contact information. You know, if you need to reach out to us, I know Caroline said she'll drop our information in the inbox. You know, but please feel free. You know, questions, comments. You know, use my cell phone or shoot me an email. We'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. This presentation has a lot of things in it, but I'm just gonna go directly to the forgiveness side of things. So I might end up going back and forth just depending on you know what we're talking about here. So as far as forgiveness goes, you know, here's the basic rundown on slide 15 on, you know, the steps that you need to take as a small business to complete your forgiveness process. So, you know, first and foremost, you want to connect with your lender. So whoever you utilize for that first draw PPP, you want to connect with them, figure out what is the best method for you to supply them a forgiveness application. A lot of lenders, you know, have an online platform that they're utilizing for this process. You know, so you want to make sure that you check with them. You know, that if they're not accepting the paper application, you know, make sure you go by what they're dictating, because every lender is going to be different in this situation. And as you can see here on the right hand side, there's 3 different applications out right now. You know, you have SBA Form 3508S, SBA Form 3508EZ, and SBA Form 3508, which is the accountant's nightmare. That's our standard forgiveness application. We're not anticipating too many folks to realize really using that particular form. When you look at the overall picture of the loans given out with the first and second wave of the Paycheck Protection Program, about 86 to 87% of the loans that were provided were for $150,000 or less. So that's where your first 2 forms are going to come into play, especially the revised SBA Form 3508S. This form originally was utilized just for small businesses that had PPP loans of $50,000 or under. Now that was recently revised about a week and a half ago or so, and now that's going to incorporate loans of $150,000 or less. And then you have SBA Form 3508EZ, which incorporates a lot of the safe harbors and exceptions that are initially in place for small businesses to help you avoid any sort of forgiveness reductions. So when that comes to, you know, how your business could it operate at full capacity due to the health and safety requirements by the CDC and other, you know, state and local governments, or, you know, did you have issues with your full-time equivalent employee reductions, you know, due to just not being able to hire folks back or hire folks at similarly that you know are similarly qualified to who you had previously, or maybe they had, you know, other issues, firing for good cause, things like that. So we'll go over some of those things today, and you know, but ultimately you want to make sure that you end up connecting with your lender, because they'll dictate how they want that process to go. So once you figure out how you're going to submit your application, whether it's paper form or through an electronic format, you want to compile any documentation as need be. So now keep in mind, with these applications, there is a set of instructions. So before, as of a few weeks ago, those set of instructions were a separate document. With the revision of all of these forms, I think they just basically put the instructions on how to fill it out and what documentation that you need to support that particular forgiveness application with the PDF itself. So it's all in one PDF. And you can find these documents all on SBA.gov. We have a coronavirus relief section that you can go to, whether you're looking at PPP, whether you're looking at the economic injury disaster loan, or, some stuff that's upcoming, such as that shuttered venue grant program. All of that can be found under the coronavirus relief section. And, you can just go to the section that, applies to you. PPP Forgiveness has its own section now. So, if you've gone to SBA.gov in the past, you've probably noticed that everything was lumped into one section. That is no longer the case. So then once you've contacted your lender, you figured out what you need to fill out, figured out what type of supporting documentation you may need, you're going to submit that forgiveness application and that supporting documentation to your lender. Your lender, per the guidance, has upwards of 60 days to submit that a forgiveness application with supporting documents to the SBA. Now, keep in mind, most lenders, they're doing that much faster than 60 days. I would say overall, in general, I mean, I don't know if you would agree on your end, Anna, but it's taking lenders a pretty, quick amount of time to turn those over to the SBA. However, the SBA sometimes can take, a long time with their final remittance. So once the lender submits that to the SBA had a self-imposed 90-day forgiveness remittance that, trying to provide a brand promise that they would supply the final decision on that forgiveness application. For the most part, I would say 95% of forgiveness applications are being provided with a final remittance by the SBA within a reasonable amount of time, under a month time frame. But there are some loans that, our lenders, probably all of our lending partners probably have a handful of loans that are going over that 90-day limit. So right now, the SBA is trying to add more employee power to that cause of forgiveness, and also with our overall PPP platform, because the overwhelming amount of applications, both on the forgiveness side and on the origination side for new PPP loans, it's setting the SBA back a little bit when it comes to both ends of the decision-making spectrum. So just keep in mind, for the most part, if you haven't gotten a decision and it's going on a few months, most of the time there's really nothing to worry about. It just has to do with overall volume. There are going to be instances where your loan may go into review. So the SBA does sporadic oversight review. They pull random loans for auditing purposes. And then for larger dollar loans, so $2 million or up, they actually will be auditing all of those loans. So if your loan goes in for a review, expect some sort of notification from your lender, detailing what additional documentation you may need to supply. Now, keep in mind, even though some of these new processes when it comes to forgiveness for small dollar loans, a lot of it's streamlined and you don't really have to provide too much supporting documentation. If your loan goes into review, you will need to supply a variety of documentation. So, you'll see in the instructions that even if you're using that 3508S and you don't necessarily have to provide your calculations for how you got your overall forgiveness, you still want to make sure that you retain that information for your records. And you are required, part of the program, to retain all of your financial records, whether it's for payroll expenses or non-payroll expenses, for up to 4 years. So just be wary of that, because that will happen from time to time. I've seen loans as small as $2,500 go in for a review. So yeah, and then at the end of the day, you want to just communicate with your lender. I'm sure most lenders, have a different form of communication, whether that's through email, whether it's phone call, stepping in a branch, whatever the case may be. But just realize your lenders are working very hard, very diligent when it comes to this process. And if they don't have an estimated time frame of when this forgiveness will happen, really, it's not their fault. The SBA does not provide them with any sort of queue that kind of dictates how long the process will take on our end. You know, even if they submit a request for that, they just get a very generic response back saying that it's still pending, and you know, wait for further notification. So they don't get any sort of estimated timeframes on the forgiveness process end of things. So let me go to the 3508S. We'll just go over some of the updates that occurred. So this 3508S, this actually was originally for loans of $50,000 or less. Okay, so now the SBA, when the Economic Aid Act was signed at the end of December, they came up with there was a lot of talk of a new streamlined application for loans of $150,000 or less. Really, what the SBA ended up doing was just revising one of the applications we already had out there. So now the 3508S includes loans of $150,000 or under. So just keep in mind, if you're a borrower with a loan of $150,000 or under, you can utilize this form, whether it's for your first draw or second draw PPP forgiveness application, but you cannot combine both loans into one application. You'll find that first draw PPP and second draw PPP, they do have different eligibility requirements. So you want to keep that in mind. You will need to supply two separate forgiveness applications if you get two PPP loans. So for all intents and purposes, this application requires fewer calculations, less documentation for eligible borrowers. It does not require borrowers to show the calculations used to determine their loan forgiveness amount. However, the SBA may request the information and the documents to review those calculations as part of its loan review or audit process. So like I discussed before. And then if this loan forgiveness application is being submitted for that second draw PPP loan, you know, we're going to focus on first draw today, but second draw PPP loan information, you will need to submit documentation because you have a revenue reduction requirement as far as your eligibility goes on that second draw. So if you didn't provide that on your second draw application when you were applying for the funds, you will need to supply that during your forgiveness side of things. But that is for second draw only. So I'm just gonna not going in order here. I'm gonna go back here. So I want to talk about payroll and non-payroll expenses, because what happened with the signing of the Economic Aid Act, it made some enhancements when it came to, you know, what you can utilize the funds for. And so keep in mind, this actually applies to first draw PPP loans that you may have gone in the first or second wave. So they actually will backdate this for folks that may have already used the funds, but you know, maybe they use some of the funds for some of these purposes that technically were ineligible at the time of your covered period. So, you know, for the most part, payroll costs, they're going to be defined by the CARES Act. So there's really not much different when it comes to payroll. So it's your salaries, your wages, your commissions, any sort of cost related to, you know, healthcare, group healthcare, life, disability, vision, dental benefits during periods of paid sick leave, medical, family leave, or group healthcare, life, disability, vision, and or dental insurance premiums. So most of that is the same. What's changed a little bit is there was more elaboration. There's more opening for your non-payroll expenses. So, you know, it's now you're able to cover a lot of additional expenses. So if you haven't gotten a first draw PPP loan, you know, all of this is going to be covered. But if you have already gone through the process and maybe you utilize some of the funds for non-payroll expenses and you weren't 100% sure if those were covered at the end of the day, so maybe you were anticipating the loan to not be fully forgiven. These types of things that I'll go over, they're actually they're retroactive to your initial covered period. This does not extend your covered period by any means. So if your covered period ended, you know, say in September, you don't have any more time allotted to you to utilize funds. This just, however, may help or benefit you if you utilize funds for purposes that were not eligible at the time you initially had the PPP loan. So covered operation expenses, as you can see here, it's really opened up to a lot of different things. So, most stuff that was included in the CARES Act, all stuff that was included in the CARES Act is included with the Economic Aid Act. So your utilities, mortgage interest, lease payments on real personal property, all of that still applies. But, you can have a laundry list of other items, as seen here. So you have, just to name a few, accounting or tracking of supplies, inventory, tracking, records and expenses, HR, all of that, those different things can now be utilized with PPP funds. All property damage that may have happened if you had any sort of vandalism or looting issues during public disturbances over the course of 2020 that may have not been covered by your insurance, that is now covered, is an eligible non-payroll expense. And then covered worker protection expenses. So your PPE equipment, or there's a variety of different examples given in the guidance. So it could be a restaurant. Maybe you had to put up those plastic sneeze guards or cough guards, whatever you want to refer those to. But those are eligible. Or if you had to expand your outdoor seating, and the cost that incurred from that's an eligible non-payroll expense now. So keep that in mind, that those are some things that are now open. And if you're applying for that second draw PPP, all of these things are covered. So let me go here. So some additional PPP loan details, forgiveness loan terms. So when it comes to your covered period, you had either an 8 or 24-week covered time frame when you're talking about your first draw. If you received it within the first or second wave over the spring or the summer. Okay, so that was something that you, as a small business, you can dictate for yourself. That wasn't something that you needed to initially let your lender know. But with that said, the program dictates that you can utilize the funds in certain ways. So when it comes to payroll, if you're intending to get fully forgiven for the loan, you have to at least use the PPP funds. At least 60% of those proceeds need to be spent on these eligible payroll costs, okay? And then no more than 40% can be spent on the eligible non-payroll costs. Now you have to utilize these funds during your covered period. So the cost that so a couple of things with that is you can pay for certain things outside of your covered period, but the cost of that had to have been incurred during your covered period. So whatever that covered period you ended up using, 8 weeks, 24 weeks, you had to have incurred those costs during your covered period. There can be no prepayment, for different, say, your lease, there's nothing, or your utilities, there's no prepayment. It has to be, maybe your covered period ended on September 30th, but you got your September bill on October 5th, but it was for, the cost of electricity for the month of September during your covered period. That's fine if you paid for it outside. It's just no prepayment. You can't pay something for November or October if that's outside of your covered period. Also, too, you want to make sure that when it comes to overall forgiveness, when you're dealing with loans of $150,000 now, you're not going to need to supply all of the calculation information that you would have had to before. However, you want to still maintain those records. If you're applying for forgiveness on a loan of $50,000 or under, keep in mind you're going to be automatically exempted from any sort of reductions that may have occurred with FTE count reductions that may apply to these situations, or salary and wage reductions. Now, for the most part, folks don't have to worry about these reductions to your PPP forgiveness if you didn't reduce hourly wages more than 25% on your employees, or you didn't reduce salary more than 25 percent, or so keep in mind the 25% is that key. If it was less than 25%, that's not going to be factored into your overall reduction forgiveness. So, but for most of us, I think we're going to probably see 90% or more of these forgiveness loans between the safe harbors that you can apply to these sort of reductions, the limits when it comes to actual loan amounts, and what's automatically waived depending on your loan amounts. We're not probably going to see too many small businesses that are going to be affected by wage reductions when it comes to or hourly reductions. When it comes to these things too, as long as there is probable cause for certain instances, a lot of that falls under safe harbors. So safe harbors are in place, so again, you don't get dinged on when it comes to PPP forgiveness. So the SBA doesn't want to start dinging employers based on every situation that may have happened over the course of 2020 with their employee staff levels or wage levels. So if you had employees that you offered good faith you offered good faith offers to come back to the workforce, and they denied, they rejected that offer, you as an employer, you can't control that. So the SBA has safe harbors in place that if you're dealing with those situations, as long as you document your offers to rehire at the similar wages and same hours, and the employee rejects that, you're doing your due diligence and making sure that you're trying to the best of your abilities to maintain your employee level. Also too, you may have instances where staff level changes because you had to fire someone for a good cause. Just maintain record of those things. You're not going to be reduced on your forgiveness because of those situations. Just make sure that if that causes a reduction in your full-time staff, make sure that you have documentation to support it if you need that when you're supplying your forgiveness application. Also, you could have a reduction in hours. Maybe you're dealing with a parent that has, a child going to remote schooling. That's very common. And they can't work a 40-hour week, and they were working 40 hours prior. Those are things that are just out of your control. Again, it's all about documenting those instances, and those are going to be exceptions to any sort of reduction on your forgiveness law. But for the most part, really, if you're utilizing the funds for eligible payroll purposes that I discussed and eligible non-payroll purposes, and stick within that 60-40 split that I discussed, you should be, fine when it comes to forgiveness. One big thing to note, which I think, let me see if I think I have it on a slide here, is the EIDL advance. So I know a lot of folks probably may know about the economic injury disaster loan. So that's a loan that's provided by the SBA itself. It's not through one of our lending partners. But with that said, when the CARES Act came out, the EIDL loan also had a EIDL advance, a feature that a lot of folks elected the option to take that if they could, if they were approved for it. With that said, that advance was upwards of $10,000. Hold on one second. I know I got it on one of these slides here. Oh yeah, here. So that advance was, for all intents and purposes, considered a grant. The PPP is, for all intents and purposes, considered a grant. But what happened is, under the CARES Act and the way that it was written, is that no one business entity could have more than one form of grant under the CARES Act. So that presented a problem when it came to PPP forgiveness, because folks were applying for PPP forgiveness, assuming that they use the funds all in the correct manner. They used the funds for at least 60% of eligible payroll expenses. They didn't have too many issues when it came to FTE counts and all of that stuff. But then came along this EIDL advance reduction. So what happened there was the SBA had to factor in the EIDL advance that was received by that entity. when it came to your final remittance on the SBA forgiveness portion. So if you got a $5,000 EIDL advance, if you were intended to be fully forgiven, you may have been stuck with a small loan at the end of the day through the PPP program, because that EIDL advance was factored into the overall decision. Now, with that said, your lender, if you've already gone through the process, your lender probably has reached out to you to start payments and things like that. With the Economic Aid Act, one of the enhancements that happened was now the Congress recognized the amount of issues that was causing for the borrowers, the amount of issues it was causing for our lending partners, and they removed that requirement. So if you haven't gone through the forgiveness process yet and you received an EIDL advance, you won't have to worry about that being factored into your forgiveness decision. If you've already gone through the forgiveness process and you've gotten a final remittance from your lender, and maybe you've even made some payments on the PPP loan at this point, the SBA right now is working behind the scenes to make sure that all of those that have already had those advances deducted get reimbursed with whatever interest occurred, on their loan. So the lenders don't have that information yet. That is still being worked out, but expect probably within the next, month or so for that to be worked out. You'll probably be getting notifications from the lender that you're working with, if you already had an open loan that the SBA has, provided reimbursement on that, and then the loan, in that case, may be fully forgiven in a lot of situations at that point. So, keep in mind that is upcoming. You will, get that reimbursed. However, make sure that you connect with your lender, because the lender may still keep you on your payment plan that you have, or they may defer the loan. So this is another reason why it's very important to stay connected and communicate with your lender on that. And then just going back to some PPP forgiveness details. When it comes to this loan, all of the loans are at a 5-year maturity. The only ones that probably are not at a 5-year maturity is if you applied early in the first few months of the process, before the Flexibility Act was signed in early June. You may have applied and you had a 2-year maturity date. However, we're seeing that a lot of lenders may have modified that note to increase it to a 5-year maturity. But again, that's something that is up to your lender to make that decision. So if you feel like you are going to owe some funds at the end of the day for one reason or another, again, that's something you want to connect with your lender. If you're on a 2-year maturity, connect with them, see if that's something that they can entertain. But ultimately, that will be a decision based on the lender you utilize. And when it comes to these loans that are $150,000 or under, right now there's really not much documentation that you're going to need to supply your lenders. But keep in mind, you are providing your initials on certifications that you utilize the funds in the proper manner, that you did maintain records of anything that was required for eligible payroll expenses or non-payroll expenses. So just because you do not have to supply, you are supplying your initials as the business owner or principal of the business, and you're certifying that you utilize the funds in the proper manner per the program guidance. So keep in mind, these loans could get reviewed. Like I said before, you don't want to just start initialing away if you don't have documentation on hand. One good thing to note is if you're a small business and you don't have an accountant, you don't have a financial advisor that may be able to help you gather whatever sort of documentation you may need, please feel free to reach out to SBA resource partners. So whether that's SCORE, whether that's the Small Business Development Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, or the Center for Women and Enterprise, these are all organizations that can help you, through this process. I think I have a slide towards the end here. Yeah, so these are some of the things that they can assist you on in general. They provide all sorts of technical assistance to small businesses in a general sense, but they're really heavily focusing on, the PPP process, whether you're applying for a first or second draw, whether you're applying for forgiveness, they can definitely, help out. So here are some of the sites for the organizations. Obviously with everything going on, everything's pretty much virtually or over the phone, but keep in mind they are trying to help folks as in a timely basis. So I don't know where we are on time, but Anna, if you want to open it up more to talk about what Eastern Bank is doing and how the bank looks at things, and then
Sure,
we want to get questions.
Quickly, if I could, Anna, and thank you so much, Dan, for that. I just want to say the chamber is also here to help you with all of those pieces, putting your documents together, doing your calculations. That's part of your membership. That's part of what we're doing. We're committed to that. And if we have if we can't sort it out, we will reach out to folks like Dan and Anna and Caroline to get that to you. So I just wanted to chime in and say, don't go to all those other places. We've got you. That's what we're here for. And I will turn it over to Anna. Thank you so much. Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name's Anna, so I'm with Eastern Bank, and I'm overseeing PPP forgiveness for the business banking space. And I wanted to share some best practices on forgiveness, but before I share those tips, I did want to make sure that everyone is aware that if you apply for forgiveness and your bank remits that forgiveness application to the SBA, you cannot apply for an increase to your first loan if you did not take a maximum. So that is something very important to note, that if you didn't take the max loan in the first draw, you can apply for an increase to capture those remaining funds, but you can't apply for forgiveness first. So just want to throw that out there because we don't want people missing out on money that they're eligible for. So when it comes to PPP forgiveness, a lot of what I'm going to say will apply to documents you now need to supply to the bank if your loan is above $150,000. But as Dan noted, even if your loan is under $150,000 and you're going to use the 3508S, you have to hold on to this documents for upwards of 3 to 4 years, I believe. So it still applies to you. You're just not going to send it to your banking partner. Another common misconception before I share tips and tricks is you have to apply for forgiveness before you apply for a second draw. That is not true either. So you can apply for a second draw. We're focusing on forgiveness here, but I did want to clarify that for many folks. All right, so I have reviewed a lot of forgiveness applications. And what I'm frequently seeing is borrowers desperately want their forgiveness fully obtained. They don't want a balance owed. We don't want you to have a balance owed. And they are over documenting and supplying too much to the bank. So with the extension from 8 to 24 weeks for a covered period, a lot of borrowers are able to have their payroll completely cover their loan amount. So that's great. So if you do that, then you do not need to provide us any sort of rent documentation, utilities, PPE, any of those things. If your payroll completely covers it, that is all we need. If you'd like to retain more records on your own in case the SBA comes in and audits and does some different calculations than you had, great, but that's not needed at the bank end, because when you supply us those documents, we need to make sure they comply with SBA standards. So although I may see that you have a $200,000 PPP loan, you had $350,000 in eligible payroll costs, but you provided proof of rent payments, well, then I need your lease agreement. And then I need all this other documentation that's going to slow down your forgiveness process and require you to put more documentation into your file. So if you use a payroll provider, such as Gusto, Paychex, ADP, you are paying them for a service. And one of the great services they offer you is providing you a CARES summary, so a PPP loan forgiveness summary for your covered period. And they will include eligible line items from your payroll and summarize it for you with an FTE, so an employee look back report. So if that document shows your total payroll expense during your covered period, covers your loan amount with that FTE report, that is all we need, just those two pieces. So if you pay someone to do your payroll, see if they can provide that to you, because it's going to make your life a lot easier and your forgiveness. When it comes to other non-payroll items, there are some nuances with what's required and needed to have those items count.
Like I mentioned, if you provide proof of rent payments, we need the lease to go with that. So just make sure you're reading the SBA FAQ on forgiveness and understanding what documents are required. I know a lot of banks such as Eastern, we have this posted on our website too, so you can check it out. But for example, for rent, we need the lease agreement with canceled checks. We need this to show it was made during the covered period and proof it was paid in February. So that's a big miss. Even when we get canceled checks and lease agreements, we're still missing that proof of that it existed in February, because that's part of the CARES Act. And this is the same for utilities. So we need copies of invoices or statements with proof of payment during the covered period and also for February 2020. Another misconception that's happening with borrowers is if they applied during, the first rounds that Dan mentioned, which was like April, May, before the regulations changed in about June, they were originally an 8-week covered period with a 2-year payback. The legislation that passed, I believe in June, expanded all borrowers to up to 24 weeks for the covered period. So we've seen some applications come in where they opted for the 8-week and they had a loan balance due, but if they had opted for the 24-week, they would not have had a loan balance due. As a financial institution, we cannot tell you how to maximize your loan forgiveness. All we can do is point you in the direction of the guidance out there. So please, if you received a loan in April or May, you are eligible for all those benefits that changed in June. Like Dan said, it also changes your loan terms to up to 60 months. That is at the bank discretion. At Eastern, what we're doing is if you have a loan balance, we will be in contact with you to modify your loan. We did not modify the loans from April and May automatically, changing them to a 60-month term because the hopes is most of those will be fully forgiven. So why cause more paperwork for our borrowers to change that when we'll just deal with it if there's a balance? So if you have a balance, your banker will likely be in touch with your options. Another question I'm receiving a lot is, I got my loan in April. I had to apply for forgiveness within 10 months. That's this month. That's February. It's not. So you have 10 months from the max covered period. So if your covered period, the maximum is 24 weeks, you get 10 months after that. It's technically 16 months. So that brings you to October. So you have plenty of time to apply for forgiveness and get your documentation in a row, or wait for your bank to start accepting the new 3508S application for loans under $150,000. And then the last thing I wanted to share so we can open it up to Q&A is, okay, I sent my application to the bank, now what? So when we receive your application, if it's fully documented, we'll transmit it to the SBA. For Eastern customers, you'll receive a DocuSign, which is everything you put in that electronic application, the attestation that Dan is talking about, initialing that you provided everything, and then it goes to the SBA. We have up to 60 days, they have up to 90 days. We're not taking that long. I bet many banks aren't, but the SBA is running probably 60 to 90. Once they review it, they can either ask for more documentation, and if we don't have it, we'll reach out to you. But if they just pay your loan, then you'll receive an SBA payment notification letter. And for our customers, we also load that into our portal so you can see that electronic communication. It has been updated that if any loans that we've submitted that had an idle advance, maybe thought they were not getting that forgiven, the SBA payment system has been updated and those are being paid for new forgiveness applications. If you submitted your application prior to the legislative changes on 12/27, you are showing a balance in our system. But like Dan said, we're just waiting for guidance from the SBA on how they'll be paying those. And if anything's needed from our customers, we will reach out to you with what's needed to get those fully paid. But we're hopeful that the SBA is just going to remit those payments and there'll be nothing needed from business owners. So that was a lot. I tried to talk a little bit fast while still in a way that you can understand me, because I think the Q&A is the most important, because I'm sure there's some unique situations or unique questions out there that people have.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us today to present on this topic. I know it's of major importance to all of our small business members, so we really appreciate it. So I'm popping in to help with the Q&A. Some of these topics have kind of been touched on by each of you during your presentations, but I just want to restate them just for clarity's purposes and make sure we didn't leave out any information. So the first question is, 1 you wanted to know if the SBA will be sharing their presentation, like the slideshow.
So yeah, I mean, I can send you over this one. So this particular one, is more of a general overview of all of the updates on economic relief for small businesses due to the Economic Aid Act. So if folks want that, I can help supply you the PDF for it.
Yeah, and Dan, if you send that to us at the chamber, we can supply that to all the registered attendees.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Cool, perfect. Is the forgiveness period still for only 2.5 months of payroll? What if we used it for longer months?
So as far as the calculation goes, so of how you're calculating your PPP loan, or?
I believe so, yeah.
That sounds like a mashup of the second draw and the forgiveness.
Yeah, so when it comes to calculating, if you didn't apply for a first draw PPP loan, you're gonna basically use your average 2.5 months, to get your calculation base. When it comes to second draw payroll, there's going to be a little difference just depending on what NAICS code you have. So the only benefit, if you're in the food and service sector and you have a NAICS code 72, you can times your average payroll by 3.5 times. Versus 2.5 times. That's the only time you're going to see that when you're calculating, how much PPP loans funding you can get. But for first draw, the maximum amount of loan you can get is still 10 million. Second draw, the maximum amount, regardless of how you do your calculation, is $2 million.
And I think the question because I have this question myself, so members just know that even us at the chamber are still trying to catch up with all of the various changes, which is why we have the experts. Originally, you could pick those 10-week period, but now, from what Anna's saying, you can actually expand it to 24 weeks. So, in essence, if what you borrowed, you ended up using it for 3 months because you had some staffing changes or whatever, or you covered it for 4 months, it's still forgivable. Okay, so that's when when Anna's saying use the 24-week period. In some cases, you might exhaust it all with just that, which is the easiest way to do it, because then you only have one document you have to keep up with, whatever Gusto or your payroll company gives you. I just wanted to clarify that, because that's been a big question that's come up for us. And in fact, originally at the beginning, it was only supposed to be for 10 weeks. When they realized this thing wasn't going to go away in 3 months like they thought they did when this first started, they decided, let's go ahead and expand this to 24 weeks.
Yeah. So 8 weeks, and originally started back in the beginning of April. Then the Flexibility Act opened the door for it to be more flexible, no pun intended. But and that aligned everything. That was early June, I think. So you could select 8 or 24 weeks. Now, with the Economic Aid Act, it basically states that you can select any time frame of 8 in between 24 weeks. So any given time frame within those weekly periods.
Thank you. Our lender is only using online, but they said the SBA is not accepting online forgiveness applications at this time and not resuming until March. Is that the case? And this person's lender is actually Eastern. So Anna, you might have.
Dan and I were actually having this conversation before. So we have not been given anything electronically from the SBA, any notifications that they are fully ready to accept the 3508S up to 150. Dan's saying they are, but until we see it in writing, we don't, no offense, Dan, believe them, and we don't want any customers to get caught in the crosshairs. So we're waiting for them to be fully up and running. If that communication comes out sooner, then we will be ready as soon as they are. We just, for the ease of customers, because a lot of people wanted to take advantage of the new process up to 150. We just haven't gotten that communication from the SBA that they're ready, but hopefully Dan will be able to share some information with me and we can turn that back on.
Yeah, we did send a procedural notice. It came out about a week ago. So I think it's just a confusion on the system side of things because the 3508S now is for both first and second draw. So but the second draw has different eligibility requirements. So we haven't gone over it today, but second draw basically includes that 25% reduction. And for most loans that fall within the 3508S, you need to provide documentation with your second draw forgiveness. That portion of the application. So that's additional questions and different features. That's not going to open up in the portal until March 5th, I think. But actually, the 3508S standard for first draw, that should be open, and there was procedural guidance. We'll make sure that the lenders make sure we have it and everything. We'll get on the same page. But there was definitely questions from different lenders in the lending community about that, because I think what happened was the folks in the portal that answer the inbox in the portal, they weren't clarifying the difference between the two.
So for the ease, sorry, Dan, for the ease of not confusing our members too much, why don't we at the chamber follow up and with the various lenders and make sure that their portals are going, and if there's problems, we'll get Dan and the appropriate other person to talk, so that we have time for the last couple questions here, because some of this is just technical stuff behind the scenes that needs to get lined up. But go ahead, Michael.
If you use Safe Harbor, does it require less documentation as well?
So as far as the different safe harbors go, you want to make sure that you have your supporting documentation. You may not necessarily need to supply that documentation, but you need to maintain it for your records, because if your loan goes into review, even if it's a $10,000 loan, your loan could get pulled in for review, and then someone like Anna at Eastern will end up contacting you and saying, hey, SBA wants to see X, Y, and Z on documents. And a lot of that may have to be with additional payroll information or different safe harbor documentation that may apply. So if you had to fire an employee for good cause, that's going to happen. That's normal course of business. Those things are going to happen. Just document those. I mean, and typically you probably should document that anyways, just on a legal standpoint of things. You should always document those types of instances. If your employee asked to reduce their hours because of that example I gave earlier, maybe their child's remote school, they have to stay home to help support that. Just document those instances. If you are hiring your folks employees back, you want to make sure you provide a good faith written offer when you do that. And then, just document however they responded to that, whether it was they accepted it or, if they turned it down for whatever reason, just try to document that. You're not always going to get a written notification back from them, but, I'm sure whether it was an email, text, whatever the case may be, but you as the employer should probably have a written notification anytime you're dealing with any sort of HR concerns. And then when it comes to not being able to operate due to like health and safety issues with the CDC, it's really just important to print out what the state guidance is at the time, of your covered period. So, you can typically go to like the state of Massachusetts website. I'm sure you can find that guidance of that range of, what applied, during your covered period. So if you're a restaurant and, the different phase, I don't know all the phases off the top of my head, but the capacity issues are, for most restaurants, everybody can pretty much say that if you're a restaurant that you weren't able to operate at full capacity. Just have a printout of that. But I don't know how often right now that will really come up when it comes to loan review.
All right, thank you. And then the last question we have is, are there any further changes expected on forgiveness details? Does it make sense to go ahead with the application at this point?
I mean, I don't know of any changes. I mean, they've already published interim final rules. So interim final rules are the pieces of guidance that the SBA and the Treasury utilize to, provide the guidance for these programs, whether it's on the origination side of things and applying for PPP funds or the forgiveness, the process. There may be additional procedural guidance or smaller interim final rules along the way if they're seeing a big issue in one capacity or not. Typically what happens is, you get so many small businesses that may go to their congressman or congresswoman and vouch different concerns to them. That's when you see sometimes different changes that happen. For the most part, they already have issued an interim final rule on forgiveness, with the enhancements of the economic Aid Act. So, there may be just some smaller pieces of guidance along the way, but the meats and potato of it is published as of about like a week and a half ago.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. If there are any last questions, pop them in right now. And in the meantime, I'm going to thank Anna and Eastern Bank and Dan and Caroline and the SBA for joining us today and giving us all of this really important information that we've all been craving. I know that we've gotten so many communications from members who are both excited and concerned, as I am as a business owner. And I know that, we've had a lot of conversations with folks, and we like to know what the rules are and what's happening and what we have to do and when we have to do it. And so we really thank you all for being here today and offering all of this clarification that we have sorely needed. A quick reminder, just watching the Q&A box to see if anything's popping in. It doesn't seem like anything else is popping in. A quick reminder that we are working with Caroline and Dan to schedule a webinar on round 2 of PPP, and we'll continue to work with Eastern as well on more information as it comes up. And thank you to the members who joined us today. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you, Michael, for all of the tech. Thank you, Owen, over on the participant side, making sure everything is working there. Thank you, Grace, for being here today. Thank you all, and I will see you soon.